Welcome back to Out Loud, the Selective Mutism podcast. I'm Chelsea.
And I'm Ann, Chelsea's mom.
And today we're going to be answering your questions that you sent us on Instagram and Facebook and some on our email. Yeah, so thank you for all your great questions. We weren't expecting this many, so we're probably going to break it up into 2 separate episodes. So if you don't hear your question, stay tuned for the next episode and we'll answer it then. So the first question is that I suspect my 4th grade child has selective mutism, and the teachers say that she doesn't talk at school at all. So where do I go for help? What is the first step? The first step is to get your diagnosis. So you want to find someone who is experienced with treating selective mutism.
Yep, start with your pediatrician, talk to them about it. They may have a referral already. They may know somebody in the area that has treated other kids or patients with SM. You could also call your insurance company. I know in the U.S. it depends on who your insurance is, and they'll have a list of psychologists in your area that you could contact. I know with Chelsea, I had to call each office individually and specifically ask, had they treated any children with SM before?
I also have a resource that I'll put in the show notes from the Selective Mutism Association, or you could just go to selectivemutism.org. And they have a section on finding a treating professional. So they have a whole list by state. They have a whole list of people who have experience, so you could look up your state and find who in your area treats selective mutism.
Where are you going to post that?
Right in the show notes. So when you're listening to this episode, you can look at the information.
It's a great list. And I do think it is important to have someone who has had experience with SM. I know it's not always possible for people that live, rural areas. So finding a therapist, I guess getting a diagnosis, getting a therapist.
Yep.
And to be honest, I don't even know if you need that diagnosis to start. I wouldn't get hung up on that. If you have a concern, whatever, talk to your pediatrician, get a referral, or call your insurance company and just start some therapy.
I think the sooner the better. She's in 4th grade, so you should start as soon as possible so that she can enjoy her school experience.
And that whole process, I know, too, is very time-consuming. You're waiting to get into the pediatrician, then you're waiting for the referral, you're waiting to have that appointment set up, insurance. That's great to have that ball rolling. But I would actually just start, if you have concerns, I would start right away making a sticker chart with some goals. Even if it's one goal, pick one goal that you and your child would like to accomplish. Whether it's a verbal goal or it could just be a goal of waving to somebody, to a teacher. But I would start that right away. Just pick at least one goal, make a sticker chart, have a reward in mind. It doesn't have to be anything huge, just a small reward, something your child would enjoy if they accomplish. And it doesn't have to be every day. They don't have to get the sticker every day. But if they do it maybe 3 days out of 7, then they get a reward, because you really want to focus on the positive and have them accomplish something.
Also, if you're interested in sticker charts and token economies, I would love to do an episode about that. I have a lot of experience with it from behavior analysis, as well as doing it as a child in therapy. So if you would love to know how to set up your own sticker chart token exchange system, we'll do an episode on that. Should we move on to the next question?
Sure.
All right, so this is a big one. Our next question is in an email, and the question is, at what point do we say that we have tried all non-medicine treatment and look for a medication to help with selective mutism? This person is emailing about their 13-year-old son. You've probably tried all non-medical treatments at this point based on your email. It looks like you've done your best to address it using different therapies. Although I do think it's very important to find a therapist who has experience with selective mutism, as this person had a therapist who didn't really know how to treat it, it looks like. So I think if you're really afraid to try a medication, I would first try to find an experienced therapist.
And things change. Maybe at the time when you started therapy, there wasn't somebody in the area with SM experience, but he's 13 now, so maybe revisit that and you may have some luck finding somebody.
Right. And I think your son is 13. I think he's fully capable of expressing, you can talk to him and see if he's open to medication, if he's ready and he thinks that he's missing out on things and he wants to start, trying something different to conquer his anxiety. Try it with his input.
And I think, being 13, it's tough to know what your situation is, but obviously, too, all children are different, but some kids will talk about it. I know Chelsea, we talked about it almost daily. She brought up her concerns almost every day, in the back seat from the car when I picked her up from school. But I know at 13, some kids just shut down and they don't want to talk about it. They don't want any attention put onto the subject. But I think a lot of it too is in how you do it. It doesn't have to be this big, let's sit down and have a conversation about it. I think with SM kids, you really have to just be very nonchalant, not a lot of attention on it. And it's kind of like those, like planting seeds or whatever, just kind of feel them out. Just see if you can, sort of have a conversation about it without it being a really deep focused conversation.
Right.
Even if it's one question a day, like, what do you think about this? Or just to kind of gather his perspective if he won't, just be forthcoming and sit down and talk to you about it.
Right.
There's other ways to have that conversation.
I think a lot of people are afraid to try medication, and I think that's too bad because I think a lot of kids are missing out on experiences.
Well,
it's not necessary. I can see how you'd be afraid to try it, or you'd rather do a less intrusive treatment. But I think at a certain point, if you're not making progress, it's really important to look into that option. I don't think...
Yeah, I think with you, when we started therapy, they did ask us at the first meeting what we thought about medication. Were we willing? And at that point, we had said no, we just would like to try therapy first. But it did get to a point where I just felt like I was doing you a disservice. I felt like you were missing out on your childhood, and you were verbalizing to me that you felt different and you didn't want to be different than the other children, and you couldn't participate in things. And I could see kids leaving you out of activities because they just kind of gave up on you a bit.
I think the older you get, it gets harder. Like, kids aren't as understanding. Like, if your son's 13 and they're still not talking at school, that's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
You're at that point.
That is true. I think kids, I could see it with you in the younger grades. Kids are more forgiving, I think. They'll say anything. They just blurt anything out, but they're also more forgiving. And the older you got, it became interpreted differently by the children.
Right. You can be the weird kid. Kids just see you as not an option anymore because they've known you for years and they've given up on trying to talk to you.
Yeah, it gets tougher. So it takes finding the right one. I mean, with you, we only tried one and then that was it. That worked.
Right.
But I've heard online other kids have to try, many before getting the right one.
Yeah.
But it's always going to be an SSRI. Like any medicine, if you start reading the side effects, you wouldn't take even Tylenol.
Right.
But it is a very personal choice. I just think for you, whatever was some kids, for us, it got to the point where you were missing out on your childhood, and that's what tipped it for us.
Right. I would make a list of pros and cons. Like, what is your kid missing out on, and what are the risks of trying a medication?
And I think, too, it's also how you present it to the child, because I think sometimes it can be looked at as, I couldn't do it on my own, or like a failure. So now, now I need medication. But it's the same as any other. If you have a headache, you take a Tylenol.
Right.
Yeah, just have that conversation and sort of really give it some thought and do what's best for you.
This person also asked if there's any information about therapy animals being of help for someone with selective mutism, because they are doing equine therapy, which is horses. So I personally am afraid of horses. I think we talked about this in a previous episode where I had a cat, and I think that was extremely helpful for me. It wasn't a therapeutic type thing. It was just a pet cat.
The reason we got the cat was therapeutic, even though she wasn't a therapy cat. We just felt like, you wanted friends and you didn't really have any friends. And I was looking specifically for a cat or a kitten that would be gentle. So we did end up, I was actually looking for a ragdoll kitten, but we weren't successful in finding that. But we did get you a Persian, and we did pick one that was very shy. She was very timid and shy.
She was a gentle cat. Yeah,
she was
I've
great.
always loved animals, and I think I've found comfort in them. So I definitely think you should keep doing what you're doing. If your son enjoys hanging out with horses, then good for him. I think it could also encourage further social interaction with others if he has interests like that, where he can channel his passion.
And it's a great, like reading. I know homework and coming home and having to read out loud. A lot of people read to their pets. Like if you won't read to your parents or read on the tape recorder, we could say, go to your room and read to Karina. That was your cat. It's like a little playmate, or it's just comforting, somebody to love. So I think animals are great.
Okay, so the next question is, how do you tell your child they have selective mutism without them feeling like there is something wrong with them? My daughter is 7, and we have discussed her difficulty talking in certain situations, but not the official diagnosis. It's important to explain that everyone deals with anxiety, but you have it to a more extreme degree. I think you don't necessarily have to give the diagnosis. Like, your 7-year-old might not even understand what that even means. So I think you could just explain anxiety and that you're going to help her deal with anxiety.
Yeah, I think it depends on the child. Like, if the child's first of all, if the child is asking. If they're asking, they want to know. They want an answer. They want an explanation. So I think you help them out and you let them know it's okay.
Right. Some kids may get like a diagnosis and then they feel like there's something wrong with them and they're different from everyone, but someone else may find comfort knowing there's a name for something that has been causing them all this problems in their life.
Right, so I think it's very individual again. I think you go by the child. If they're asking, then they want to know. If they're managing on their own without needing that label, just maybe focus more on the certain behaviors that...
Right, whatever. Like you're having a problem with doing this, so we're going to work on that.
I do think in telling the child that they have selective mutism or not, one of the indicators is, if you think your child's self-esteem is suffering, then I would go ahead and have that conversation, because then I think they do need comfort or reinforcement that, we understand, this is what you're feeling, this is what's going on, but don't worry about it, we're going to help you.
And other people have it, and other people overcome it. So the next question is, what do you wish someone had done to help you with your SM when you were a child? A lot of it has to do with school and the way teachers reacted and just like accommodations for certain assignments, like being more understanding.
I think you're right. I think teachers is probably the biggest thing. At home, we got it. We had sticker charts. We worked on it every day. And at school, when you had a teacher that worked on it with us, we were in a great place. Things went great.
Right.
Because you're making progress, and the times are tough when you don't have a teacher that's working with you. That's when it's tough.
And it should be across the board. Every teacher treats you the same way, so you're all on the same page and working towards the same goals, but it's not always going to be that way.
So I think if you have a teacher, I think the biggest thing is having a teacher that's working with the parent towards the same goals for the child, just that they're willing to take the extra care. That was the biggest thing that when we saw progress with you. And
then the next question is, have you met anyone else with selective mutism? And I have.
Okay, so you did.
This is a question for me.
I know.
You're answering it.
But no, you did. But when did you meet them?
I didn't meet anyone in my whole childhood until after I no longer had selective mutism, which was at Stephen Kurtz's Brave Buddies program at Child Mind Institute in New York.
And how old were you when you went to that camp?
High school. But it was like really different to meet someone who had selective mutism growing up, because I've always felt like I don't really fit in with people, or I have trouble connecting with people, and it was just like so amazing to me to meet people that had gone through very similar things in their life, and we all ended up at the same place trying to help other little kids who were having the same issue. So it was really interesting, and it's crazy when you're little and you don't even know that anyone else has this problem, and you think you're the only one. And you finally meet people who also had it.
That was a great experience.
Yeah.
And I just want to, again, thank Dr. Kurtz, because we just sent an email, and he responded, and we FaceTimed him, and he said, come to New York. So it was just great of him to give you that opportunity, and it was a great experience for you. And for those of you that don't know, Dr. Stephen Kurtz was part of Child Mind Institute in New York City.
Okay, so the next question is, how should parents navigate social situations and holiday gatherings with their selective mutism child? So it would be good to do a whole episode on this since the holidays are coming up, but we have Thanksgiving and Christmas coming up, And that's a lot of seeing distant family members and your house being full of a bunch of people that you don't see very often. So I think it's important to talk to family members ahead of time and ask them not to pressure your child to speak. Maybe encourage asking like forced choice questions. So you're saying like, oh, like not an open-ended question because that's harder for kids with selective mutism to answer. So you could say, oh, what's your favorite pie? Is it turkey pie or is it pumpkin pie?
Turkey pie.
Turkey
okay.
pie. Chicken pie. I don't know. So you're giving choices instead of just leaving it open. And that's easier for them to answer. But I know that some family members may be, I guess, unreceptive to changing their habits with your child. So what are some other things? You could try to prepare your kid for what to expect around the holidays. They like to know what's coming and what time things are happening. What time is your aunt and uncle going to be here? What time is grandma going to be here? So I think it's important to know like exactly who is coming and when.
I know with you, we didn't really have a lot of relatives around, really just your grandparents.
Right,
But
because they're all in Canada.
yeah, and we didn't prep anybody or whatever with you coming over to the house. We just sort of let it roll and see how it goes. Sometimes if you became overstimulated, you would just leave the area on your own and go up to your bedroom or whatever. Yeah,
It's good to talk about it beforehand and say if you feel like you need a break, go take a break.
The only thing, the only thing I ever said, I think, was just to not use the word shy, because that became a problem for you and you hated the word shy. And if somebody did say the word shy, they were kind of blacklisted. So we just asked people, can you please not use that word? Yeah, so that was really it.
I feel like there's a lot of gift giving also that raises issues where you're expected to say thank you or hug every single person. So
Yeah,
I'm trying to.
that was very
I would love
tough.
to do a whole episode on this because it's hard. I don't like hugging people. I'm sure other people can relate.
I know, and we did, we should talk about that because before Christmas we should do an episode on that.
Yeah.
We tried a few different things, and I don't know. It just happens when it happens. I think when your child's comfortable, they'll say thank you.
Yeah.
It's not that they're not thankful. It's just they have a difficulty saying those words.
Yes. You can always write thank you notes. If that's
true.
easier too.
Yeah. So do you have any more questions? What else is on the list?
Okay, so the next question is, should teachers address selective mutism with the class? And we did talk about this before, about how my teacher in first grade talked to the class without me, or actually no, I was there. She said that when I'm ready to talk, I will talk, and I do talk in other situations, so she doesn't want to hear people saying she doesn't talk, she's shy, blah blah. Everyone just needs to stop talking about it, and I will talk when I'm ready. So I do think that was very helpful, and I think that teachers should address it with the class if it's a problem, where if your kid is hearing every day kids talking about them and just bringing it up every single day and it's causing your kid extra anxiety, I think it would be helpful to have the teacher talk to the class. Whether your kid is comfortable with that happening with them in their room is up to you. I think for me, I would rather have not even known about it. Like if you had talked to my teacher and maybe they just talked about it when I wasn't in the room.
But on the flip side of that, you really respected the teacher that she did that for you and stood up for you, and that was part of the warming up process between you and her?
That's the way that she did it was perfect, and I think there's room for error with teachers who would totally embarrass you, not meaning to. But if you're in the room and they're like talking about you, that can be hard.
I think it's kind of in the heat of the moment because
Right.
kids were saying things and she just wanted to stop it then and there.
Right.
And so she didn't use a diagnosis or anything. She just sort of interrupted the class and said, look, enough is enough.
Yep.
Chelsea does talk. That's enough. I don't want to hear it again.
Again, I think it's individualized, like it's based on your whole experience. I've seen people that have kids like presenting things about selective mutism, which is amazing. I could never do that as a kid.
Right.
Where they're going in the class and like showing like a video or something, and there's kids who have brought in books for the class where it's like about which I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that, but
that's really putting yourself out
right.
there.
If it's helpful for your kid, then good for you. And you should do it.
So the general answer is yes.
Yes.
But depending on the child.
Talk to your kid. Always ask your kid what
what do they
comfortable
want?
with.
Right.
Yeah. But if it's an issue, I would say definitely resolve it with the teacher.
Because it is damaging. I mean, for a long time, kids would say, she doesn't talk.
Right. And that
Chelsea
sets you up
doesn't
for
talk.
failure. Like, you
Yeah.
need an environment where you feel like you you can talk when you're ready. And if that's happening, you're not going to feel safe.
Yeah, anytime there was a substitute teacher, some kids would announce, Chelsea doesn't talk. So then how could you?
Right.
The teacher,
It just
yeah,
sets
they've
you
already
up.
said you don't.
So yeah, good question. Let's see what's next. This is from the same person who asked the last question. They were asking about homeschool. She says, I'm considering homeschool not only to protect her from bullying, but hopefully to work with her in a smaller group she's comfortable with and to build up her confidence. What are your arguments for and against this?
I think, first of all, it depends on the age of the child. Like, we don't know the age there.
I think we do, but...
I think it's different in older children. I think it's a different scenario.
So, I have a lot to say about homeschooling, but it could even be another episode. I think the first arguments against it I can think of are if your kid is young, it's not really giving them a chance. I think if they're alone, one-on-one at your home, they're not being exposed to other children, that's not giving them, it's not solving the problem, it's taking away the problem, which I think is maybe beneficial for their education because then they're not dealing with all this anxiety stuff, but then they're missing out on fixing their social problems, and you can't overcome it if you're not in that environment.
Right, it takes away the opportunity to succeed.
Now, I do think if this kid is a teenager and maybe school is miserable for them, they're being bullied every day and you've tried everything, then their education's being compromised. Maybe that's an option for you. This person seems to say that they have like a group, which I don't know a lot about homeschooling because I know some homeschooling people have like communities where they are with other kids. So I do think if you have like a small group, it could be beneficial.
Right, that could, right.
Like the smaller group could be helpful.
Yeah, I just think every child's different, right? And every situation is different.
I remember I've definitely asked to be homeschooled before.
Your brother did repeatedly
Yeah.
because he was ADHD, but I don't
He was
ever
always in trouble.
remember you requesting that.
I think when I was really upset, I just wanted it to go away, but at the same time, you just want selective mutism to go away. And by taking that whole aspect away, you're not really facing the problem.
Right. I mean, school is good, even though it's difficult, but it also gives you a place to, if you're going to therapy, if you're doing the charts, if you're doing medication, it gives you the environment to succeed in, to practice the skills that you're learning. But like you said, I think if the child is totally panicked, where they cannot function in school, the grades are faltering, then maybe it's time to try something different.
Yeah,
and maybe
or even a
homeschooling
different
is the
school,
answer.
or maybe a smaller class sizes. And
Right, there's a lot to consider. I mean, private school versus public school, are there resources? Is there another diagnosis besides SM?
Right.
That is impacting either the learning or the verbal. And then also, there's the whole issue of teachers. Do you have a supportive teacher or not? It's a loaded question.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think if you are going to do homeschool where your kid is not exposed to other peers, then it's super important to get them in other extracurricular activities, which brings us to our next question.
Yeah, I think homeschooling, right. I think it's okay as long as you're giving them those chances and exposure and working on goals. But it's whatever's best. Ultimately, I think an invested parent knows what's best for their child.
Right.
With the child's input. Okay.
So somebody asked us, do you think karate or piano lessons might be of benefit to a 5-year-old girl with selective mutism?
Well, I can start off by saying for you, I think you were maybe 3 or 4 years old. We tried a few things. So we started off with private drawing lessons. Actually, before that, as an infant, you did swimming lessons with your dad. We did gymnastics, which went so-so. That was a group activity. We tried ballet tap class when you were 3 or 4 years old. That did not go well, and we ended up pulling you out of the class. Even though you enjoyed it, the teacher was a little frustrated, and so we just ended up pulling you out. You did taekwondo with your dad for like one lesson or something, one free lesson, I think. You did end up playing piano through middle school or elementary. Girl Scouts. And then in high school, you did band.
Right.
So we've tried a lot of different things.
We didn't even talk about sports. I did all the sports.
You played baseball, actually, on your
Soccer,
dad's team.
softball.
You did do soccer. Yeah, that's right. So we tried a lot of things. We kept you out there.
And I probably hated a lot of those. But
They were all uncomfortable. But you, not to say you hated them, I mean...
I hated sports a lot of the time.
But like the ballet tap, gymnastics, drawing. Like drawing was one-on-one. But like you asked to do the lessons.
Yeah.
But then, I mean, it was tough. It's not easy.
Yeah. What do you think
Do you
the
think it
benefits
helped?
are? I think it did, but it wasn't easy. I do think it's a good way to practice skills outside of a classroom setting, so that's good.
Mm-hmm.
And you never know, it could be, obviously it's a completely different environment from school, so maybe your kid feels more comfortable talking in karate than in the classroom. You never know.
And I think not even the verbal aspect, but just the fact for you that you were getting up, standing up in front of people and doing something physical.
Yep, you're building confidence.
I mean, piano lessons you did with a best friend.
Yep.
And the teacher was a music teacher at your school.
Yeah.
And you actually started doing the lessons at the school after school before moving to the lessons at her house.
Yes.
So I think, you have to be creative. If your child wants to take lessons, finding a way for them to accomplish that. And even though it's not perfect, maybe sticking with it, because you may not think it's beneficial at the time, but looking back, I'm sure you are glad that you did all those activities rather than just staying home and saying, I can't do it.
Yeah. Yep. And it's too bad that I didn't stick with any of them. It's kind of hard. I don't know.
Well, music, you went right through.
I know.
It allowed you to participate in band through high school.
I know. It's just sad that kids are missing out on things like this, because a lot of people like grow up doing dance or something, and that's how they know all their like lifelong best friends, and like it's just hard when you feel like you just can't do it.
That's right.
And
because it's a big networking.
Because I wanted to do dance. Like that was something I was interested in, and I couldn't do it. Like, I felt like I couldn't do it, but I wanted to. Find something your kid is interested in. That's where they're most likely to be successful, but...
And I'll just say, like, it's not always perfect. Chelsea wanted to do the ballet tap class. She was 3 or 4 years old. I want to say maybe 4. And I had called them before we signed you up to tell them sort of the situation. And they reassured me, that's okay, that's no problem. There was obviously a recital at the end, and they're like, don't worry about it, we'll just see what happens. Well, that was on the phone. When the classes started, it was a whole different thing. It was a tap class, and Chelsea didn't want to make the noise.
That's funny.
Yeah,
I didn't want to make noise with my feet or my mouth.
Right, so she was dragging her feet along the floor. She wouldn't lift her feet to step because that would make the tap sound. And after a couple of classes one day, the teacher just brought her out by her arm, kind of upset, basically saying she can't participate, she can't do the class. So after a few discussions and things, we did end up taking her out of the class, because at that point I didn't feel it was beneficial.
Funny, why did they care if we're giving them watch, I think?
So anyway, that was our ballet tap experience. It's tough.
But I think it could be beneficial, so...
You got some cute outfits out of it?
Some cute, expensive outfits, right? Okay, so the next question is about someone who has twins, and they attended like a structured play date for parents and kids, and one of her daughter's classmates invited her to play. So one of her twins said, I don't feel like playing with them, and she tried to ask, like, is it because of your anxiety? Like, why don't you want to play with them? So she's not sure how to approach and encourage social behavior among their peers. So I think this is a tricky one. I was very picky with my friendships. Like, I didn't have a lot of friends, but I was also very picky about who I was even interested in trying to be friends with. I think it's important to encourage socialization, obviously, but your kid is not going to want to be friends with every single person, or maybe they weren't in the mood at that moment. Sometimes you just don't have the energy to socialize. Maybe a different day would be different. I don't know. I think finding kids that have similar interests or just complement their personality, it's hard to find.
So with you, I would ask you, when you were younger, I would just ask you, who in your class, if you could be their friend, who would you want to be friends with? And so you would tell me maybe 2 people, 2 girls, and then we would focus on those children or one child to try to develop a relationship with. And then I also spoke with the teacher and told her that Chelsea had indicated that she'd like to be this girl's friend, so that maybe, sit them beside each other. If you need pair work, maybe pair them up together, just to maybe have a better outcome. But I think ask your daughter, who is there that you might like to hang out with, and then kind of go from there. Sometimes it's better, just one-on-one, not in a group.
Yeah.
Where this was a group activity.
Sounds like this girl is in 5th grade, so that's a bit older. Like, at that point, you're not really being, like, put on play dates. You're kind of on your own with making friends, so I think it's harder. But I think if you're involved in, again, like, extracurriculars, like, if say your daughter's interested in, like, art, if she's in an art group, she's more likely to find someone who is also interested in art.
And sometimes too, not an activity like through the school. If you get something maybe in the next town over or something.
Right. You get a fresh pool of kids.
Right. And I think too, just again, if she shuts down trying to have that conversation with her, because 5th grade, you're kind of at that point again. So much of it is just being just really nonchalant and just, sort of putting it just very casually, asking your questions and sort of gathering information to kind of get her point of view if she's not willing to just have that conversation. What kids she might be interested in hanging out with, whether she finds it easier when her twin is present or to do it individually without her sibling.
Yeah, the whole twin dynamic's interesting to me. Don't know how that affects the selective mutism. I bet it's interesting.
As a parent, sometimes we can be,
yeah, like you're just trying to fix everything. Like, not everything has to be related to selective mutism. Like, you gotta pick your battles. I think that will come in time. You don't really need to be pressuring your children to engage with every single peer. Like, they'll find certain people that they're comfortable with, and you want to promote those relationships.
Yeah, and everything doesn't really have to be planned either. You could just, drop her off at the library for an hour and go back and pick her up. No, but, just for exposure, it's opportunity to maybe meet classmates and can't always be planned,
I would say exposure to more kids, like, you have a better chance of meeting someone that they'll get along with through more opportunities. I hope you found something helpful out of this. We have a bunch more questions, so stay tuned for that. We haven't forgot about you. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, so thank you to everyone for submitting your questions. It was really interesting to see the array of topics covered. It brought back some memories.
It puts you right back there. Make sure you're following us on Instagram and Facebook so we can continue these types of interactions. And make sure you leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And thank you to everyone who has already done that, because it really helps spread awareness and helps other people see our podcast.
Okay, so thanks for joining us today, and we hope you all have a great week, and talk to you next time.
Goodbye.